Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to hashtag Got Money. Gosh, it's the end of the year, and I've had some incredible guests come on to Got Money over the last 12 months. I just couldn't think of a better way to end the year with my favourite economist, who also now is the economics consultant with social outcomes and a counsellor for climate change. I welcome kindly to the show Nicki Hutley, who's also at Deloitte's. Welcome, Nicki. Welcome to Got Money.
Thank you. Always lovely to talk to you.
So climate, council and social outcomes, let's unpack that a little bit. What have you been up to?
Well, I've probably for at least 10 years now had a very strong interest in the economics of climate policy, climate change, and also just the social impacts. People tend to think of economists as number crunchers, and GDP and this went up and that went down and we need to raise interest rates. And I think we come under a lot of criticism for not always taking into account what the personal impacts are. Do we actually need growth? Why should there be a universal basic income? Why is it in our economic interest to actually do something about climate change, and why it will cost us more not to act on climate change than it will to implement some policies? So I kind of have been interested in unpacking all of that and giving economics that a three-dimensional view, if you like, of understanding the interaction of the social and the environmental, not just the numbers. And I think that brings it home for people and makes it a little bit more relevant. And we can actually answer some policy issues when we use economics. I talk about economics for good or economics for a better world. When we use economics to understand the full implications of the policies we implement, we just get a much better impression of what we're doing and who it's impacting. It's not just about, well, this might add to growth. It's like, well, does this have an adverse impact on certain parts of society? Really unpacking those things. So economics, it's about that, helping people understand that economics is about more than numbers, and helping governments particularly to think about all the implications of policy and not just have a one-dimensional view.
Are they listening? Are governments listening to you when it comes to climate change and social outcomes?
So two very different questions. I'll take social outcomes first, because I think this is something they are doing, and what governments have come to understand over the last 10 years, and your listeners may not have heard of a social impact bond, but this is an experiment that's going on all over the world, in fact, where governments say, show us your social program, usually to a not-for-profit, someone like Vinnie's or Mission Australia, and say, all right, if you're helping homeless people get out of homelessness, and you want us to give you some money to support that program, what do we get back in return? And it's all very well to say, well, we make people's lives better, but the government says, show me the money. And what we can do is to actually say, well, the evidence is that when you're in homeless, you are using homelessness services to, 4 times the amount, social services, 4 times the amount of somebody who's in stable housing. So you're more likely to have interactions with the justice system because you fall into crime. You're more likely to have, alcohol and other drug dependence because your life is not good. You're more likely to be unemployed and on social welfare. So if you can give people stable housing, it not only improves their lives and the outcomes across all these other different fields, but it actually means the government is spending less in the long run. And so they're doing what we call a cost benefit analysis. And they say, well, actually, if we help you now, we will get this back over time because we'll have to spend less money supporting you. So it makes economic sense. It's not just about being a decent human being or having a decent policy. So I think on that social impact side, governments are getting it, and their social impact bonds are complex, but governments, mainly state governments, are doing something called payments by outcomes. And so they're saying, right, you've got a theory that you can help these people's lives. We'll pay you for those outcomes that you get. And so they negotiate with the providers to say, all right, well, what's the impact? And it forces those who are delivering those services to say, well, what is what we call a theory of change? What is it that you're actually doing to improve somebody's life? How does that mechanism work? How will you improve their employment prospects or improve their self-confidence and their family functioning? All these sorts of things that fall out of the back of, one thing that's ostensibly about homelessness or education, but has these broader benefits. So yes, government is listening there. Climate change, not so much. State governments and councils, get it, and they're trying to do some. We've had the great announcements particularly from New South Wales, investing in renewables, South Australia, Victoria, the same thing. The federal government still doesn't get it. And we put out a research paper quite recently that showed that people sort of think, oh, if you act on climate, it costs us, because they heard all that rhetoric. Think of some shock jocks who are going, oh, a carbon tax is going to put the price of everything up. But that's actually part of the story. The other part of the story is that if you don't act on climate, 1 in 3 jobs in Australia is vulnerable to climate change. Whether it's the storms and cyclones we're seeing on the north coast of New South Wales and Queensland now, the bushfires that we had all over the place, these extreme weather events plus permanently rising heat temperatures will cost people permanent jobs. So not acting, yes, if we act now, there'll be a small upfront cost, but it will deliver huge benefits for us, new export industries, new jobs created. If we don't act, we're missing out on those opportunities, and we're going to have disruption to the economy on a scale that is of a par with what we have seen this year from COVID.
Oh,
I guess we're talking, 30 years out, but 30 years is just one generation. That's our kids or our grandkids, it's not that far. So I hope with the election of Joe Biden and, pressure from Boris Johnson, for goodness sake,
of all the people,
our government will start to listen a bit more. And, if people really want to, understand this, there's so much literature out there. And I'd point to the Deloitte Access Economics report that was made public a few weeks ago, because it explains what these costs are in very simple terms of, what it is. So having all of the information, not just listening to the politics of climate.
So it needs to be policy, doesn't it? We need this stuff in as policy.
We do. And yes, there will be jobs lost, but there will be jobs created. And I think, people forget that we have been through tremendous and tumultuous change in the past. We got basically a lot of the textiles, clothing and footwear industry, particularly in Victoria, disappeared as we took down tariffs. But we've created new industries in their places. And as a result, we have access to more goods that are better made and cheaper for us.
So with climate, is it just a matter of everybody getting solar panels on their roofs? Or is there a lot more that we can all be doing personally to help manage what we're currently in? Because, I watched the beach at Byron Bay just get washed away and knew that was coming. I know that anyone that's sitting on beachfront property right now are nervous, and that's just the start of it. So what can we do as individuals, do you think, that we can start, or do we just put pressure on government? What's the solution?
So I think we need to do a couple of things. Look, I'm very passionate about this. I sit on the board of the 1 Million Women organisation, which is all about educating people, and women as the primary decision makers in most households. But obviously everybody can use it on how you can be more sustainable, how you can reduce your environmental footprint. So we can all act in lots of ways. I actually went from vegetarian to vegan a couple of years ago because cattle is bad. And we can make lots of decisions, and particularly reducing your food waste. There's so many things that we can do to reduce our own personal emissions. But at the end of the day, the biggest impact on the planet comes from the corporate sector, and particularly from the fossil fuels industry. And there is no denying that. So whilst, those of us that can afford to have put solar, or have got a house that faces the right direction, have put solar and panels on, and that makes economic sense as well, because you actually cut back on your electricity bill, so it helps you. We want broader recognition, and you can see around the world that fund managers like BlackRock, the biggest fund manager in the world, has said we are not going to invest in fossil fuels anymore. We are pulling out. And so, you can look at your there's websites you can go to look at your, and 1 Million Women has a comparison thing there. You can look at what your superannuation is investing in, your bank, who do they lend money to, and encourage support. But alongside that, it's all very well to say, well, we'll just take our money out. But we also need governments to help us transition, because there will be job losses and it will be difficult on some communities. But there are plans in place, and the New South Wales government is doing lots of work in this space to understand how areas like the Upper Hunter can be transitioned. The Victorian government has done wonderful work around the Latrobe Valley and invested a lot of money, for building investing in an electric car manufacturing plant. There are lots of different things, but we all need to work hand in hand. It's not just you or me or government or the corporate sector. We all need to be in there, but government needs to lead the way, and it needs to provide sticks and carrots to, the incentives and the disincentives for people to act and for corporates to act in the national interest, because the costs of not doing so are very dire.
It kind of feels to me too, they've just had that massive announcement about the stimulus for social housing. You'll be stoked about that. I'm seriously stoked. And they're asking for 7-star energy rated properties. That's nice, but not very many people are building 7-star. Do we need to modify how we also build our homes? In South Korea, they do just passive housing. You don't have to eat off a grid. You can literally warm your house by rubbing your hands together in your home. Do we need to change how we build inside the space as well?
We definitely do. And there are some, I think they call it biophilic design. There's some amazing people out there who can design houses. And the thing is, everyone goes, oh, this must be a lot more expensive, but it doesn't have to be. And particularly if you build it from the start, the same goes for universal access, universal design. And it's not just people with a disability. It's if you've got a pram or if you break your leg for 6 weeks. We all need these things. And if we build all our new houses this way, we're not only saving the environment, but we're saving, when you think about social housing, this is for low-income families. So let's build things that actually get them having a lower energy bill all the way through. Governments give people vouchers for energy. What a silly way to spend money. Give people that money to buy energy efficiency, whether it's appliances or putting bats in your roof or whatever it is, double glazing in the winters, whatever you need, something that returns you a benefit, not something that you have to keep handing out forevermore. But yes, I am stoked about affordable housing.
I love this. You're so animated. This is an entirely different kind of conversation. I'm just loving it. So what are you pushing for other than policy change? Why have you moved into these sectors other than you feel quite passionately about it? What do you want from it? What are you looking for? What's the return for you to Nicki Hutley from moving into these two sectors?
Oh, look, it's all about following your passion. I'm old enough now that I can make career choices that, build on. And look, I am incredibly privileged. I realise this, to have the option to work in areas where I have an incredible passion. I mean, being appointed to the Climate Council is kind of an absolute career highlight for me, because I am so passionate and I see the damage that's being done, and I just believe so strongly in what needs to be done. And I believe that economics can help make that case and help convince governments, I hope, on the need to act and the benefits for everyone of acting. Not stop focusing on the costs, look at the overwhelming benefits that more than compensate for the upfront costs. The same with social outcomes. I'm very lucky in life. I've had amazing opportunities, but I get super frustrated when people say, just get a better job, or just get a job, or people are sitting out there getting lazy because they're getting paid too much on New Start, Job Seeker. For goodness sake, could you try and live on $40 a day? It's ridiculous. And there are people out there who haven't had the opportunities that I've had in life, or you've had, who haven't had a great education, who need help. I was talking with Vinnie's the other day and the homelessness services, and they were talking about one guy who came in. He had no front teeth. He'd been homeless. He'd had his teeth knocked out. They helped fix his teeth. Got an orthodontist to do the work.
Yeah.
And the confidence in this man, he was actually able to go out and felt confident enough to apply for and get a job. But this is not. You can't just say to people, go and get a job, or the deputy Prime Minister saying, oh, there's all these jobs in the regions, just go to the regions. What if you've got all your family support? What if your partner's got a job there? Your kids are in school. People can't just get up and leave. So I just see that we could be a better, kinder society. And if I can use economics to help even nudge to the tiniest millimetre some better policy outcomes, then I think my time will have been well spent.
Oh, it's just
maybe beautiful. I'm dreaming.
No, this is legacy stuff. This is really gorgeous. How do you feel? Are you optimistic about Australia now?
Look, it depends. I am at heart an optimist, and so my default position is we can do this. We can do this. I do have days when I'm kind of like, oh God, we've gone too far and we're just never going to get anywhere. But you have to have faith in the goodness of human beings, because there is, despite some of the evidence to the contrary, there are some amazing people out there doing amazing things. I, work with people at Singularity U who are doing just the most insane stuff in technology, all aimed at solving the sort of, sustainable development goal issues. There are lots of people out there doing fantastic things. We can do this. We all have to be a little bit less selfish, and that doesn't come naturally. Your first instinct is always protect yourself and your family. And sometimes we just have to put others, when we can, put others first. But, we have the wherewithal, and Australia is so lucky. We have amazing. Yes, there are obviously people who are, and think of Indigenous Australians, a lot of new migrants, who do it very, very tough. I'm not denying that. But as a nation, we have the wealth, the resources, the most, fantastic education, a universal health system. We have all of the tools to build a really super country. Now, look, there will always be disadvantage, but we can do a lot. There's sometimes there are things you can't fix, but we could do a lot more. And I'd especially like it to see us do more focus on closing the gap with Indigenous Australians, because that is, quite frankly, a disgrace that we still haven't cracked that one yet.
That's a weird one for me. I'm a Kiwi. I just find that so weird. We talk about our Indigenous people with such respect and courtesy, or at least, I do, and I know my family does. I love my Kiwi families. I want to ask you about the economy really quickly. We had 398,000 expats come into Australia, and we've got unemployment. Was this a smart thing to do, to bring all these people back in with such high unemployment? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you could argue that we're bringing people back, but at the same time, we're not getting skilled migrants in at the rate that we were. And to the extent that these people coming back have skills that we need, it's a really good thing. In fact, if you caught Gladys Berejiklian the other day, she was actually saying she wanted next year for the government to think about how we might not just get people home, get students in, but how we could actually tackle the next issue, which is around getting those skilled migrants back. Because if you look at the skill shortages, they are growing. So to the extent that, local talent that might have fled abroad for whatever reason is coming back, that could potentially be a good thing for us. We also got a very low population growth, and population is part of what keeps our economy moving for all those, what we call population serving industries, whether it's health or retail or, tourism and accommodation, all of those things. The slower our rate of population, the slower, the more difficult and challenging it is for those businesses. So it's not necessary, yes, there are more people in here and more people challenging for contained jobs, but, look, the economy is doing much better than anyone thought at the start of this year. We've all been massively shocked, pleasantly so.
You're excited. So tell me about that. Where are we tracking? Because it was going to be a long haul. Are you happy with where we're at right now?
So, typical economist, yes and no. So I am absolutely stoked. Start of the year, we were talking about scenarios of 20% unemployment, seriously. We now don't think it'll even hit 8 at the peak. But that said, unemployment is still 7%. The effective rate is 7.4%. That is, 50% higher than it should be in a normal circumstances. There's always a level of unemployment because people are coming and going, and there's all sorts of different types of, we economists put fancy names to. And the economy needs to have a certain level, but you don't want it to get, too high. You don't want it to get below 4 because that has adverse consequences, but you certainly want it to be a lot lower than it is now. So for those who have permanently lost their jobs, for those who have permanently lost their business, they might have lost their home, they might have lost their family. There is a long tail to this downturn. Yes, we have recovered so much more quickly than we ever would have in a normal recession. And that's because we in Australia have done so well at fighting the virus. We've been able to lift those restrictions. You have a look at what's happening in other parts of the world, and it is just awful. The UK going into a double dip recession, down 10% this year. The US will have 2 years of negative, back-to-back years of contracting economy, negative growth. Australia has done amazingly well. But we can never forget, you can't use that, that it's like I was saying at the start, economists talk about the big picture number. You've got to look at all the faces behind those numbers and acknowledge that there are people out there that are doing it tough. But as a whole, gosh, and the fact that we now got the state borders open, that's a fantastic thing as well. That will bring back more jobs. I still worry that we're going to pull out stimulus too quickly, the job seeker supplement and JobKeeper.
Oh, you are. I wondered.
So, we talked about the fiscal cliff. Well, it's, we've pulled out some stimulus already, and clearly the impact hasn't been as dire as it was, because people have had to spend money in certain places, and they've just taken, well, I'm not going on holidays, so I'll do home renovations. And so they've moved their money around. But, we're not sure how that's going to play out in 2021. Look, we're still in a better position. We still look like we're going to have the economy growing, which is brilliant, but it has to grow fast enough to create more jobs for the people here. And that's going to be the big question as to, what that looks like.
So JobKeepers, I wanted to ask you about JobKeeper, because I wondered if if it was running too long, are those people that are currently on JobKeepers, would it be fair to say that they're just not going to recover, and perhaps they need to go and find a job? Because, what are your thoughts about that? Because I think we had 3.8. Let me get my numbers back up. I was looking at this and I'm thinking,
yeah, we went from 3.6 to 1.5 million on JobKeeper.
Yeah.
Is that the number you're talking about?
Yeah.
Which is great, because as the economies have opened up, businesses haven't needed it. But also they really tightened up on the conditions for you getting it. So it was a lot looser at the start, and more people were getting it. So it's a bit of tightening of conditions, but it's also the fact that a lot of businesses are doing better. I'm less worried about JobKeeper going, because I think it is propping up a lot of zombie businesses.
Yeah.
This time last year, it was, I'm trying to remember the numbers, is 5, no, I'm going to get this wrong, but basically the number of insolvencies is down 40%.
There we go.
And that's obviously because they changed the laws, and there are zombie firms that are there. What I do think needs to happen, though, is that there will probably, if you take that much stimulus out of the economy in a short period of time, when we haven't recovered, then you're going to need to do something else. And I'm not sure that what we've got from the government in terms of incentives for business and tax cuts for people is going to be enough. But look, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that the economy will have enough momentum going into the new year that we will get that right. But, we'll see. And the Reserve Bank's come out with the minutes from the last meeting today and said, things are much better than we expected, but we're still on, watch and act kind of.
Oh, it's too early to tell, isn't it? And it's going to be really interesting, because everybody's mingling at Christmas. What happens to the COVID numbers, Jan, Feb next year, first quarter of next year? Look,
I think that's right, yeah.
Property market's been amazing. The stimulus, the amount of money that they're spending on real estate's incredible. So, and I'm really glad they came up with another initiative to home builders. So that's been extended. But we spent, we're at August, it was 300 billion we'd borrowed. Can we continue to borrow at this rate? And did we go through the ceiling on the 300 billion?
Yes, the ceiling, the federal ceiling had to be raised, and that's fine. The thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're looking at the states or you're looking at the federal government. Debt to GDP ratios are rising. Obviously, we saw downgrades to the credit ratings for New South Wales and Victoria.
Yeah. But
we are still at Victoria's AA, New South Wales is AA+. The impact on interest rates, it's a couple of basis points. It's nothing. Our debt is so highly rated. No one thinks that an Australian government isn't going to pay the bills. And we are highly sought after by other investors. It's part of the reason why the Australian dollar is doing so well at the moment. Not necessarily good for exports, but we are in a very strong position. We will pay back. We will get through this. We will grow the economy. It's not what you'd want or what you'd ask for, but it's not the end of the world. So I'm not worried at this stage. We do, of course, at some point have to pull in the spending, but now is not the time to worry about it. And I think there was a survey of about 50 different academic economists, and overwhelmingly the view is this was the right thing to do. Interest payments, funnily enough, interest payments now, even though we've got much more debt, they're lower than they were 3 or 4 years ago, the amount we have to repay every month, because interest rates are so low. So we are in a good position. We're not at worryingly high levels. We're nowhere near other parts of the world. We will be okay.
Talk to me about China, because that's always a fun topic for us. My question, and I wrote it down deliberately, is can China do life without Australia?
Well, we can, but we don't necessarily want to have life without China. We are so incredibly dependent on them in terms of our export market, so 1/3 going there. However, we have now entered what appears to be a full-blown Cold War with China, and China is, I was talking to a former diplomat friend, flexing its muscles, and which a bit scary, and they're sort of really, they're Schwarzenegger-like muscles.
Yeah.
And for us, China's been very careful in picking the markets that it is, or the good commodities that it's blockading, essentially. It's still putting lots of stimulus into its own economy. It needs lots of steel, so iron ore is fine, and that's our biggest. That's about 1/3 of the take or more. So they're picking things that are inconvenient and obviously have a big impact on the particular sectors. As far as coal goes, I'd be happy for us to never find another client. Let's find a different product to export.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen. Everyone's putting in net zero emissions targets anyway, so that's going to happen to coal. For things like wine and beef and lobsters, obviously we need to find other markets, and that's going to take time, unfortunately. That's not something we can turn around overnight. But I'm told that you can grab $20 lobsters for Christmas this year. So if you like them, go out there, grab lobsters, support the local industry, because they are doing it extremely tough.
Isn't that terrible? It's a shame for them, but absolutely, it's been a windfall for us. You are just a legend hanging out with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for just sharing. I mean, climate council and social outcomes. Who knew? I had no idea. You dark horse out there wanting to change the world. Come and join us again next year. We want to hear what you're up to. Thank you for your support with Got Money. I mean it. Amazing. To our listeners, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and an extremely happy, happy, happy New Year. Got Money will be back again next year to answer any of your money questions. Take care, everyone. All the best. Nicki, amazing. Thank you. I'm really excited about what you're doing. I've been working with the social